My name is Loretta, but most people don't call me that anymore. In this building, they call me Ms. Retta, like my name is something fragile that might crack if they say it too sharp. I'm 78 years old. My hands are thin now, all veins and soft wrinkles. And when the nurse helps me button my cardigan in the morning, I watch her fingers move with the certainty I used to have. There's a window beside my bed that looks out onto a parking lot and a line of tired trees. In the afternoons, the sun comes in like a quiet visitor and lays itself across my quilt, warm as memory. That's when the past walks in without knocking. I used to think the worst betrayal in a woman's life had to come from a man she loved, a husband, a lover, someone whose mouth once said your name like a prayer. But life teaches you strange mathematics. Sometimes it's your own child who becomes the knife, not because he hates you. No, something colder than hate, because he believes he is entitled, because he believes you will always forgive, because he believes a mother is a bottomless well, and because he believes no one will ever believe you when you finally say the truth out loud. My son's name is Darius. He's 42 now, which is an age that still sounds young to me, even though I know what 42 can hold. 42 can hold a whole lifetime of decisions. 42 can hold the moment you choose kindness or cruelty, and then build a house around that choice. Darius always had a smile that made people relax. He could walk into a room and rearrange the air with it. Teachers loved him. Church ladies pinched his cheeks. Old men called him young boss like it was a blessing. He learned early that charm could be a key. He learned later that it could also be a weapon. I keep seeing the night it began, the night I stopped pretending my son was just stressed, just going through something, just needs prayer. It was a night with applause. Isn't that how so many tragedies start? Not with thunder, with clapping, with music in a room that smells like money. It was a fundraiser at the Westbrook Civic Hall, all white tablecloths and glass centerpieces and speeches that sounded like polished coins. Darius had been invited to speak because he'd become somebody in town. Executive title, nice suits, a car with leather so clean it looked like it had never held a real human problem. He stood under the lights, tall and glowing, talking about leadership, discipline, building generational wealth. He said those words like he'd invented them. People nodded like they were drinking him in. I sat in the second row because mothers are often placed where they can be seen, like proof, like a certificate. Darius's wife, Simone, sat beside me. She was pregnant then, just starting to show that soft curve like a new moon. She held a water glass with both hands like she was trying to hold herself steady in a world that was already leaning too hard against her. When Darius finished his speech, the room rose in applause, and I clapped too, not because I felt proud the way mothers are supposed to. I clapped because I was trying to chase away the dread that had been living in my chest for months, the dread that came when I saw how he spoke to her in small moments, the dread that came when she flinched, not dramatically, not like in the movies, but like her body had learned to brace before her mind even knew why. Then a man near the back, some older donor with a loud laugh, called out something about family. "Darius, you're a blessed man. That wife of yours looks like she keeps you grounded." Darius smiled into the microphone and I saw something flash behind his teeth, something not bright, something sharp. He said, "Grounded? She's a sweet girl, sure. But let's be honest, some people are blessings and some people are blessings and some people are expenses." The room laughed because people laugh when they don't want to be the only one who didn't. People laugh to stay safe. People laugh to stay included. And then I heard it. Simone laughed too. A tiny laugh. A brittle, broken little sound like a glass trying not to shatter. She laughed because she knew the rules. She laughed because she didn't want the room to turn and stare at her like she'd ruined the party. She laughed because she'd learned what I learned long ago. Sometimes your dignity is the price of peace. But the sound that broke me wasn't her laugh. It was Darius's. He laughed with the room, loud and easy, like he'd told a harmless joke, like he hadn't just reduced the mother of his unborn child into a line item. And when he stepped down from that stage and leaned toward Simone, I watched him whisper something into her ear. Her smile froze, her eyes went distant, and she nodded. "Yes, sir. Thank you, sir." Like a woman nods when she's trying to survive the moment until she can get home and breathe again. I didn't confront him that night. I didn't stand up and make a speech. I didn't pull him by the sleeve and hiss, "What is wrong with you?" I was his mother, yes, but I was also a woman who had lived long enough to know that public fights turn into private punishments. You don't rescue someone by handing their abuser a reason to rage harder in the dark. So I held my tongue. I smiled at people who came over to tell me I must be so proud. I touched Simone's arm lightly, a silent question. Are you okay? She squeezed my fingers once, so quick you might miss it. Then she looked away like she couldn't risk hope. On the drive back to their house, I sat in the back seat while Darius drove, and Simone stared out the window. The city lights smeared across the glass like wet paint. Darius talked about networking and new partnerships. He didn't once ask Simone if she was tired. He didn't once mention the baby. He was full of himself the way a man gets when the world applauds him. That kind of fullness makes some men generous. It makes other men crueler. When we arrived, he parked too close to the curb. I remember that, because small details root themselves into your mind when you're afraid. I watched Simone step out slowly, one hand instinctively near her belly. Darius slammed his door harder than he needed to. He walked ahead of us into the house, like he owned not just the mortgage but the oxygen. I stayed a little while, made tea, asked polite questions, tried to make the air softer. Darius kept checking his phone. He kept smirking at something, some comment, some message. Simone moved around the kitchen like a ghost, trying not to touch anything that might trigger a storm. When I finally stood to leave, Darius hugged me with one arm, the way men hug when they want it to look like love without having to feel like it. He said, "You good, Ma? You proud?" I looked at my son's face, his father's jawline, my father's eyes, and I wanted to tell him that pride without kindness is just vanity in a nice suit. But I didn't. I just said, "Get some rest." He winked. "We will." When I stepped outside, the night air hit my skin like truth. Cool and sharp. I turned back once and saw Simone in the doorway behind him, half hidden. She met my eyes, and in that second her face changed. The mask slipped. She looked trapped. I drove home with both hands tight on the steering wheel, even though my knuckles hurt. I didn't cry. I didn't pray. I just drove, with my jaw clenched so hard my teeth ached. Because somewhere inside me, the old memories started rising like smoke. I had promised myself I would never raise a man who became his father. And yet, that's the thing about cycles. They don't always come back wearing the same face. Sometimes they come back wearing your son's smile. The next time Simone called me, it was 3 weeks later, early morning. I could tell something was wrong because her voice sounded small, like she was speaking from inside a closet. "Miss Retta," she whispered. She always called me that, never Mama, like she was afraid to claim me too closely. "Are you busy?" I looked at the clock. The nursing home wasn't my home yet then. I was still in my little house on Maple Street, the one with the creaky porch and the rose bush that never listened to winter. My kettle was humming. The world was normal. "No, baby," I said. "What's going on?" Silence. Then a shaky breath. "I think I'm bleeding." My stomach dropped so fast it felt like the floor disappeared. "Where's Darius?" Another silence. Longer. He's here," she said, and the way she said here sounded like danger. "He's in the shower." Something in my chest tightened. I lowered my voice. "Listen to me. Put on your shoes. Grab your ID. If you can, grab your phone charger, and come outside. Now." She made a sound like she was going to protest, then stopped herself, like she'd learned arguing could cost her. "I can't," she whispered. You can," I said, and my voice surprised me. It wasn't gentle anymore. It was steel wrapped in velvet. "You can. I'm on my way." I drove like the devil was behind me. I ran red lights. I didn't care. I was 78 now, but back then I was 74, and grief makes a woman young again, in the worst ways. It brings back the speed, the panic, the animal instinct. When I arrived at their house, the driveway was empty except Simone's car. The curtains were drawn. The morning was too quiet. I knocked once, twice. No answer. I tried the doorknob, locked. Of course it was locked. I walked around the side and saw her through the kitchen window. She was standing there in socks, one hand pressed to her belly, the other trembling over her phone like she didn't know what to do with it. Her face was pale. Her eyes were huge. I mouthed, "Open." She shook her head. Then I heard it. A man's voice in the hallway, loud, irritated. Darius's voice. "My son, what are you doing?" Simone flinched so hard I saw it from outside. I didn't think. I picked up the heavy ceramic planter from the porch, one I recognized because I had bought it for them as a housewarming gift, and I smashed it against the glass. The sound was violent, shattering, a clean break in the silence. Simone screamed. Darius shouted. I reached in, unlocked the window latch, shoved the window up and climbed halfway through like a woman climbing out of one life into another. "Simone," I said, "get your purse." Darius appeared in the doorway, dripping from the shower, a towel around his waist, his face twisted in rage and disbelief. He looked at me like I was a stranger who had invaded his kingdom. "What the hell are you doing?" he barked. I stood between him and Simone without even realizing it. My body made the decision before my mind did. I looked at my son and saw the boy I used to hold, and behind that boy I saw the man I used to fear. "I'm taking her to the hospital," I said. He laughed, one sharp, ugly sound. "She's fine," Simone whimpered behind me.
I turned my head slightly, not taking my eyes off Darius. Baby, go to the door. She moved, slow, quiet. Darius stepped forward. Ma, don't do this. You don't know what's going on. I know she's bleeding, I said, and I know what your voice sounds like when you're lying. His eyes narrowed. He took another step. Too close. I lifted my phone. I'm calling 911. His face changed then, fast. Not guilt, calculation. The same look he wore at that fundraiser when he made that joke and watched the room laugh. No, you're not, he said softly, and there it was, the cold underneath the charm. Nobody's going to believe you anyway. My blood went ice, because I had heard that line before, not from him, from his father. Years ago, in another house, in another hallway, when I was younger, and pregnant, and terrified, and trying to keep my voice from shaking, I stared at my son and realized something that made my stomach churn. He hadn't just become cruel by accident, he had inherited a script, he had memorized it, and he thought it would work. I dialed anyway. When the dispatcher answered, I spoke clearly, not emotional, not dramatic, clear, the way I used to speak when I worked in the school office and had to handle chaos without letting children see me sweat. My daughter-in-law is pregnant and bleeding. I believe she has been assaulted. We need an ambulance and police at this address. Darius lunged toward me, and Simone screamed, but I stepped back and held the phone higher, and something in my posture must have told him I wasn't the same kind of afraid he expected. He froze, breathing hard, water dripping down his chest like sweat. The sirens arrived so fast, it felt like the universe was finally on my side for once. At the hospital, the world turned sterile and bright. That fluorescent lighting that makes everything look too real. Nurses moved like they were trained for tragedy, which they are. Simone lay on the bed shaking, while a doctor pressed the ultrasound wand against her belly, and frowned so slightly my heart already knew. Darius arrived later, dressed now, hair slicked back, wearing his public face. He walked in with his shoulders squared like he was the victim of an inconvenience. He looked at Simone with a practiced softness and said, "Baby, I'm here." Simone didn't look at him. She stared at the ceiling like she was trying to leave her body. The doctor cleared his throat, that gentle professional sound that means your life is about to split in two. He spoke quietly to Simone. I watched her face fold. Not loud, not theatrical, just a slow crumpling like paper in water. She made a sound I will never forget, not a scream, a hollow wounded noise like something ancient in her broke open. The doctor said the words. The pregnancy was gone. I grabbed Simone's hand, and she clutched me like I was the only solid thing in the room. Darius stood at the foot of the bed, his face arranged into grief, but his eyes were watching the staff, watching me, watching angles. I saw it, the calculation, the fear of consequence. Then a nurse came in, followed by a man in a white coat, an older physician with tired eyes and a calm mouth. He introduced himself, asked Simone a few questions, examined her gently, then looked up. He didn't look at Darius first. He looked at Simone, then he looked at me, and something in his expression told me he already understood the story behind the silence. He spoke softly. "I'm required to report suspected domestic violence, but there are different ways to do this. We can make it a note that gets lost in a system, or we can make a call right now to someone who will treat this like what it is." Darius's head snapped up. "This is a family matter," he said quickly, too quickly. The doctor's gaze didn't move. "Assault is not a family matter," he replied. "It's a crime." Simone started shaking harder, tears running into her hairline. "He didn't," she began, then stopped, like she couldn't finish the lie. Darius stepped closer, his voice low. "Simone, don't do this. You're emotional." There it was again, that attempt to rewrite reality, that attempt to make her doubt her own pain. I leaned toward Simone and whispered, "Tell the truth, baby, I'm here." She turned her head slightly, and her eyes met mine. In them I saw fear, and I saw something else underneath fear. Rage. The kind of rage that comes when love turns into a cage. She nodded. "Just once." The doctor left the room and made the call. The detective who arrived later was a woman with a steady face and shoes that looked like they'd walked through a lot of sorrow. She introduced herself with calm authority. She asked Simone to tell her what happened. Simone's voice trembled, but the words came. "Broken pieces, yes, but enough." Darius tried to speak, to charm, to explain, to smooth it over like it was a misunderstanding. The detective listened, then turned to him and said, "Sir, step outside with me." Darius smiled like he'd won, like he was about to talk his way out the way he always did. But when they reached the hallway, I heard the sound of handcuffs, metal clicking shut. It's a small sound really, not cinematic, not dramatic. But when you've lived a life watching men escape consequences, that sound is like thunder. Darius's trial didn't happen overnight. Justice never moves as fast as pain. Pain is instant. Justice is paperwork in waiting rooms, and days that feel like years. Simone moved into my house for a while. She slept in the spare bedroom, the same room where my grandchildren used to sleep on holidays. She barely ate. She walked around like she was underwater. Sometimes I'd find her at the kitchen table staring at nothing, one hand resting on her belly like her body hadn't accepted the emptiness yet. I would make her soup. I would sit nearby without forcing conversation. I learned a long time ago that grief hates noise. Grief needs space. My church friends wanted to come over, wanted to pray, wanted to surround her with casseroles and comfort. I let them do some of that, but I guarded Simone too, because I know how towns work. I know how people can turn a woman's trauma into gossip if you give them too much access. Darius's lawyer tried to paint Simone as unstable, emotional, vindictive. He tried to paint me as an overbearing mother who meddled. He tried to paint Darius as a hardworking man under stress, who had simply been caught in a tragedy. But then the doctor testified, calm, clinical, unmoved by theatrics. He spoke about injuries that didn't match accidents. He spoke about directed force. He spoke about patterns. Simone testified too. Her voice was soft, but every word landed like truth has weight. She didn't perform. She didn't exaggerate. She simply told what happened, and that is what made it powerful. When the jury came back, they didn't take long. Guilty. The word hit the room like a door finally closing. Darius turned and looked at me then, and I saw something on his face that I hadn't seen before. Not rage, not charm, fear. The fear of a man who has finally met a boundary he can't talk his way through. The judge sentenced him. Years. Real years. Not a slap on the wrist. And that's when the second betrayal arrived. The one that cut different. Because after the sentence, in the weeks that followed, letters began to come. From Darius. At first they were angry. He wrote that I had ruined his life. That I had chosen a woman over my own blood. That I had been jealous of him. That I had always wanted control. He wrote in those twisting circles abusers use. How they blame you for the bruise they caused. Then the letters changed. They grew softer, craftier. He wrote about regrets, about finding God, about how prison had opened his eyes, about how he needed his mama, about how Simone had turned everyone against him. He never wrote, I killed my own child. He never wrote, I hurt her. He never wrote, I'm sorry for what I did. He wrote, I'm sorry for what happened. That's the difference, you know. A man who is sorry for what happened is still protecting himself. A man who is sorry for what he did is willing to burn his pride to keep the truth warm. Simone divorced him. Quietly, efficiently. She didn't take revenge the way movies teach you to. She took her life back. She moved to a smaller apartment near her sister. She started therapy. She started sleeping through the night again. Slowly, like someone learning a new language. She came by my house one afternoon, months later, and stood in my kitchen, looking healthier but still haunted. She held a small box in her hands. Inside was a tiny knitted cap she had bought for the baby. Yellow, soft, the color of hope. I don't know what to do with it, she whispered. I took the cap and held it in my palm. It weighed almost nothing, but it carried a universe. Give it to the wind, I said softly, or keep it until your heart knows what it needs. There's no wrong answer, she cried then. The kind of cry that shakes your ribs. I cried too, not just for the baby, for her, for my son, for myself, for the way violence travels through bloodlines, unless somebody stands in the doorway and says, not anymore. People asked me if I hated Darius. That's a question people love to ask, because it makes the world simpler if a villain is easy to hate. But I didn't hate him. Hate is too clean. Hate lets you throw a person away in your mind, and pretend you never loved them. What I felt was grief with teeth. I grieved the boy he used to be. The boy who once brought me a dandelion like it was a diamond. The boy who cried when his goldfish died. The boy who used to sit on my bed and tell me his dreams. But I also knew I could not let that boy excuse the man he became. There's a kind of revenge that doesn't look like fire. It looks like refusing to protect someone from the consequences they earned. It looks like telling the truth even when your throat shakes. It looks like being a mother who loves her child enough to stop lying for him. And yes, it broke something in me to sit in that courtroom and watch my son be led away. I won't pretend it didn't. I felt my heart split right down the seam. But what grew in that split was something I didn't expect. Peace. Not happy peace. Not the kind you post online with smiling pictures. The deep peace of a woman who finally stops carrying someone else's shame. Years passed. I grew older. My knees got bad. My husband died quietly, in a chair by the window, holding my hand like he was afraid to leave me alone. Then my own health started to thin out. My other son, the good one, the one who stayed steady, helped me move into this nursing home when the stairs in my house became too steep for my legs. Now my days are smaller. Meals come on trays. Nurses call me sweetie. The television plays too loud in the common room. Sometimes at night I hear someone crying down the hall and I think, there are so many stories in this building. So many women who survived things they never got credit for. Sometimes Darius calls. The prison allows it on certain days. His voice comes through the phone with that old charm like he's still trying to rearrange reality. Ma, he'll say, I miss you. And I'll close my eyes and picture his hands in cuffs. Picture Simone's face in that hospital bed. Picture the tiny yellow cap in my palm. I know, I'll say, because I do. I miss him too. I miss who he could have been. Then he'll say, you know I didn't mean. And I'll stop him. Darius, I say, calm as winter. You don't get to edit the truth with me. Silence. Sometimes he gets angry. Sometimes he gets quiet. Sometimes he tries to sound holy. Sometimes he cries. I let him. Tears are not proof of change. They're just water. What matters is what you do when you hang up. Once, last year, Simone visited me here. She walked into my room carrying a small bouquet of lavender, and the scent filled the space like a blessing. She looked older, too. Life marks everyone. But her eyes were clearer, stronger, like she'd built something inside herself that no man could shove against a wall. We sat by the window and watched the trees move in the wind. "I'm dating someone," she told me softly, almost like she was afraid the universe might hear and punish her for joy. I smiled. "Does he treat you gentle?" She nodded. "He listens. He doesn't raise his voice. And when he gets upset, he steps away instead of stepping into me." I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding for years. "That's how it's supposed to be," I whispered. She reached across and took my hand. Her grip was warm, alive. "Thank you," she said, "for believing me, for not choosing silence." My eyes burned. I squeezed her hand back with what strength I had left. "Baby," I told her, "I chose the truth because I couldn't live with another ending." She stayed a while. We talked about small things: weather, books, her job, the way her neighbor's dog barked at leaves. Ordinary things. And you don't understand how wholly ordinary feels until you've lived through violence. Ordinary is the new luxury. After she left, I sat alone and listened to the building hum. Nurses' shoes, distant laughter, a cart rolling down the hall. I looked at my hands in the light. These hands have held babies. These hands have wiped tears. These hands have signed forms, paid bills, cooked meals, folded towels, and once, long ago, dialed a number that changed everything. If you ask me what I learned, I'll tell you this: love that requires your silence is not love, it's captivity with a pretty name. And if you ask me about revenge, I'll tell you something else. The sweetest revenge is not watching someone fall. It's watching a woman stand back up. It's watching her life become her own again. It's watching her breathe without flinching. Sometimes at night, when the halls go quiet and the moon puts a pale stripe across my quilt, I think about that baby Simone lost. I think about the babies I lost in ways no one saw. The hopes that died quietly behind closed doors. The dreams that never got to grow teeth. I don't know where lost babies go. I don't know if there's a place for them, a soft field somewhere beyond our understanding. But I like to imagine they become light, small, stubborn light, the kind that shows you where the edge is so you don't fall again. I am old now. My world is small, but I am not ashamed of the truth anymore. I am not afraid of being believed, and that to me is freedom. Because in the end, when the applause fades, when the courtroom empties, when the letters stop coming and the phone goes quiet, all you really have is the life you protected, and the life you refuse to destroy with silence. And if you're listening to me right now, somewhere in your own room, with your own memories sitting heavy on your chest, just know this: you are not alone. You don't have to carry it like a secret stone forever. The truth is heavy, yes, but it is also a door. And sometimes the first step out of a cage is simply saying, in a voice that finally belongs to you, "I remember," and I thought that would be the end of it. A door closing, a lesson delivered, a clean cut. But men like my son, they don't stop when you deny them. They stop when the world denies them, and even then they keep trying to slip through cracks like smoke under a locked door. 2 days later, the social worker stopped by my room with a soft knock and a cautious face. Her name was Marlene, a woman with kind hands and tired eyes like she'd spent her whole life holding other people's pain without letting it spill onto the floor. "Miss Carter," she said gently, "we need to review something." She sat at the little table by my window and laid down a thin stack of papers. Not thick, not dramatic, just enough to change a person's whole life if they signed the wrong line. "Someone called the office," she said, "claimed to be your son, asked about your finances, your accounts, your medical decision paperwork." My stomach went cold in a way I recognized. The same cold I used to feel when he was a teenager, and I'd catch him lying with that smooth face, waiting for me to blink first. "He asked for a power of attorney form," Marlene continued. "Said you'd probably want to name him soon since you're here." Here, that word landed like a slap, not because it was rude, because it was true. Because I was sitting in a room with white curtains and bland furniture and a call button on the wall like I was fragile glass. I folded my hands in my lap and breathed through it. "What did you tell him?" I asked. Marlene's mouth tightened. "I told him we do nothing without you, but I wanted you to know. Sometimes family tries to move fast when someone gets older." I stared at the papers. The ink looked harmless, clean, professional, like a snake in a suit. And in that moment I understood something sharp. Darius wasn't coming to apologize. He was coming to inherit. He thought the nursing home meant I was already halfway gone. Thought I was soft, confused, easy to steer. I looked Marlene straight in the eyes. "Call my lawyer," I said. She blinked. "Today, now," I said, my voice quiet, steady, "and put a note on my file. No information leaves this building through anyone but me." That afternoon, my attorney came in with her briefcase and her no-nonsense face. Miss Ellison, small woman, strong spine, the kind who didn't waste words because she knew words were weapons. I told her everything: the visit, the papers, the way Darius asked for help, like he was ordering a service. She listened, then nodded once. "We lock it down," she said. "Medical, financial, everything. She slid new documents across the table, updated instructions, updated permissions, updated boundaries, written in ink so nobody could pretend they misunderstood later. Then she leaned forward and said, "And one more thing, Miss Carter. If he tries to force it, if he tries to lie and claim you're not capable, we document that too. Because that's not love. That's elder exploitation. Exploitation. A heavy word. A true word.